So it used to be the case where people didn't believe Jack. They didn't believe a lot of things. And the challenge of people like me, for example, and others in the fringe authorship field was trying to wake them up, trying to say like, hey, your normie reality is false. Go look at all the stuff that's outside the mainstream mundane reality. Well, that used to be the case. Nowadays, we've got another issue where people are awakening, but they're spiraling off into outer space, essentially, where they're kind of going, I mean, they're going a little bit nuts with the awakening process and going in a direction that isn't necessarily on mark. And one example being to disenfranchise a small segment of your audience right now. One part of it could be the flat Earth and Tartaria stuff, which I think is an example of going off the mark. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I do think that the white light soul trap idea, the more extremes versions of that are also in the same vein. Now, I don't dismiss those things because I don't dismiss them on the basis of, oh, it just sounds crazy, so therefore, like, I dismiss it. No, I dismiss it because I'm aware of what their reasoning is, what their logic is, what they base it on, and I'm aware of other things that they're not aware, and I can see how a lot of it is wrong or how it's based on logical fallacies or poisoned data pills that they've accepted and built everything else upon. So there's sometimes there's poor logic, there's emotional thinking, like hysterical thinking, and then there's just like incomplete data. I think incomplete data is probably the number one reason why a lot of people spiral off. It's because they researched a lot about a particular very, very narrow field, but they haven't broadened enough in order to tap into data from other fields that would deny or validate what they are, the directions that they're going down. Okay, so for example, with flat Earth, okay, just to quickly cover that, if you don't have enough knowledge of atmospherics, optics, physics, science, just basic Newtonian mechanics, or geometry, then you're not going to have enough data points that you need in order to invalidate these sleights of hand that you're being shown in flat Earth proofs. So you're going to look at something, it's going to make sense to you, you're going to think it's absolute proof, and then guess what? Now it's become emotionally locked into you, and you're not going to therefore even open your eyes to the other data that might show that was false to begin with. So it just kind of builds upon itself, and then you start linking your identity to it, and then now you call everyone a globetard. You know what I mean? You start going down that road, and then it becomes tribalism. It becomes tribalism and ego identification, and now it's locked in beneath the level of rationality, and so therefore nothing anyone can say will shake you out of it. And it's really no different from being in a cult, because when you're in a cult and you're brainwashed, then all of a sudden anyone that's trying to wake you up out of that, you see them as the enemy, and then you kind of reject automatically by default everything that they say. So it's ironic that people who want to escape the illusion and escape the matrix, they're boxing themselves sometimes into cult mentality and using poor thinking and poor judgment to essentially build a mental prison around themselves that locks out all evidence to the contrary, right? So all right, so that said, okay, getting back to the white light topic, I acknowledge that there is a component of truth to it. There is deception in the afterlife. There are things that can go wrong with the reincarnation process. But I do think that the fallacy is in saying that the entire mechanism is 100% a trap and there's nothing redeeming about it, okay? And the reason why I say that is because let's take universities as an example, okay? There are scam universities out there that you pay a lot of money for, you get a degree, but you find out that it wasn't even a real university. So you just paid a bunch of money and you got a degree that you can't even use because it's not even a real thing, okay? It's a scam university. So someone could say, okay, well, based on that, therefore universities are all scams and there's really no reason to ever go to a college, ever. But that's not true, because colleges originally, they were founded with good intentions. There are actual good people in there trying to build the next generation of scientists and doctors and lawyers or whatever, and that are needed. Okay, so you can have something that is either neutral or originally good, where a part of it gets hijacked or deviated in the wrong direction, or people just play their cards wrong and they make bad choices and they suffer the consequences for it. But then what? I mean, are you going to blame the system for that, or is the system doing exactly as it's meant to, in giving you the correction that you need to kind of not make those mistakes once again? So I'll give you an example on that. So when we talk about, for example, the amnesia component, people are born and we don't necessarily remember our past lives. We don't necessarily remember who we actually truly are. It's like we're kind of like knocked in the head, metaphorically speaking, and we lose our memories, and then we wind up in this maze, just like the Maze Runner movie. And so we wind up here, and what, people say, well, then how are we supposed to progress in life or get anything out of it if we can't even remember what we did wrong in a previous life in order to correct it? Like, what's the point of having our memories erased if it erases everything that we gained in a previous life? That's what they say is one reason why reincarnation is a trap and why amnesia is part of that trap. Well, see, you're looking at it with a 2x magnifying lens when you should be using a microscope that goes down to 100x. Because when you zoom in on that issue and you do your research, you realize that, number one, there are a lot of kids who are reported in the literature who do remember their past lives. And they've got other things like scars and markings on their body that corroborate with it. So when you check it with the historical data of who they claim they used to be, yeah, sure enough, that person got shot in that exact spot or something like that. There's continuity between one life and the next. But even if you discount that, you should also realize, just looking at your own life, what you're into, who you are as a person, that you came into this life not as a blank slate, but as a being that already has been loaded up with subconscious wisdom and, predispositions, talents, biases, right? You already come to life with a storehouse of inner spiritual talents that kind of they kind of well up out of you at key moments in life. Like when you're confronted with a particular decision, or you realize that something is morally wrong. When you realize that something is wrong, it's not that you remember the previous life that you've had where you did it and you got punished for it. No, like now it's become integrated into your very being. It's become part of your spiritual DNA, where just deep down that that's wrong, right? So some people that we call old souls, or maybe you're an old soul, or some of you listening are old souls, you'll realize that you didn't make a lot of the same mistakes that other people have made in life because you had an innate sense or knowing to not do that, right? Well, where did that come from? Obviously, you were not born as a blank slate. You came here with something. And that something comes from the higher part of your psyche, okay? It's like your cloud data backup. So a part of that entire thing is like right here on your local hard drive, but there's another extension through your spiritual internet connection that goes up to the cloud, and that's where the rest of your memories and being and talents and your soul destiny, everything like your higher consciousness, that's where that is. And sometimes that stuff kind of comes down into you through your subconscious and wells up during these key points in life. And that is proof that we don't get our memories completely wiped. We only get wiped of the superficial junk, I guess, that we might otherwise cheat with if we had knowledge of it during these integrity tests or challenges or lessons that we have in this life. So it kind of keeps us honest. It kind of keeps us pure. However, because we do have amnesia, if you don't have a very clear, strong connection to this cloud backup, to your innate sense of intuitive knowing, then you will be easily confused in life, and you could then easily be led astray in life and repeat the same mistakes over and over and over until you finally get it. So there's a lot of suffering that happens on Earth right now due to amnesia, but it's more of a side effect or a risk of the general amnesia process, which I think is either neutral or ultimately beneficial in the sense that anesthesia is beneficial for surgery, and that it serves a certain function. Okay, it serves a certain function. Because as I like to joke, imagine if you're 80 years old and you're crotchety and you tell everyone to get off your lawn, you die, you come back as a baby, and you still have that same mindset. So now as a toddler, you're telling everyone to get off your lawn, and you just hate everyone because you're just sick of this, you're sick of all of this. So imagine if you had that corrupt pattern with you still in this life. Like, you wouldn't be able to do your own thing in this life. You wouldn't have necessarily a fresh start to build upon the more worthwhile things. You know what I mean? So those are some rationalizations for it, or some ideas for it. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that's going on. I'm just saying that if you're going to tackle the soul death, the white light trap stuff, you have to look at the big picture and research not just the modern stuff like Howdy Mikowski and Ed Dames, who was one of the originals who talked about the white light trap. Not them, but go back in time to Rudolf Steiner, the Theosophists, the Rosicrucians, the ancient Egyptians, the Tibetans, the Greeks, Plutarch, for example. Get into those people and tap into that ancient wisdom and try to compare the modern stuff to that, and then make your judgment. Like, don't just watch freaking BitChute videos and base your entire destiny on that,